So if anybody knows me, I'm not a big politics guy. You know, I'm almost of the thinking that it doesn't matter who the president is. I'm still the one that's responsible for how I get paid, right? I'm not looking for the government to subsidize something. I'm not looking for the government to create some kind of environment that I can jump in and go play. I've got to go make that happen. And as long as I'm tuned into those things that are important to me, that are attached to my purpose, then I know that I'm going to be successful. Now, the only reason I know that is because of my past. It's that mentality that I transferred from sports over into the business world. I also have a degree in sports psychology. And so, you know, with all of us people that studied psychology, you know we're really messed up. That's why we go to college and we're like, I can't figure out what to do. I guess I got to figure out me, so I guess I'll study psychology. But, you know, psychology, I also love kids, and I also love motivating and inspiring. And so, for me, I wanted to study sports psychology, or child psychology. But what I figured out was a lot of children that I'd be working with were, you know, had some major problems. Maybe they were molested, or maybe they were beaten, or not treated right, and so now they have these issues. Well, that wasn't the kind of work that I wanted to do. Sure, I like to help those kids transform, but being in that environment all day long just made me depressed. You know, it wasn't something that I could do every day, day in, day out. There are people that can, and those people to me are angels, right? That's their skill set, that wasn't mine. But thankfully I found sports psychology. And back then, sports psychology was just starting in the 90s. And really, sports psychology was being born from a positive psychology movement, which is, you know, we want to help you be a better person versus try to figure out why you're an unhappy person and you have all the problems that you do. And what they found was that some of the most motivating people were these sports coaches. And so they started taking a lot of these things that these coaches did to motivate their teams, and they started thinking about how this plugs into positive psychology and how we get people to get their highest levels of performance. So, you know, in my opinion, that's kind of how positive psychology kind of came to be, is through working with the sports. Well, nowadays, positive psychology is the rave, right? You don't want to be a negative person, you want to be a positive person. Well, guess what? I think we've actually gotten to a point where we're too positive. We can literally fool ourselves that we are high performers. Why? Because I'm doing the best I can. I get that you're doing the best you can, but is that always going to suffice in the types of times and the changes in the business environment that we have? There's a lot of sales reps out there that try the best they can, but it doesn't mean that they're successful, right? So there's something else that's going to have to happen besides that. You just need to be more positive. And have you ever told a negative person that you just need to be more negative? Does that make them feel better? No. It just makes them more negative because now they've changed into being angry at you because you pointed out the obvious. If they knew how to get there, they would have already done it, right? So we want to take the championship mindset as we go into facing the obstacles that we have as we present our services. So within Springboard, in our sales excellence practice, we create high-performance sales cultures. We identify targeted performance improvements. We create and empower sales leaders, and we create customer-focused approaches to sales excellence. Now, you know, a lot of the work that's done today, they'll tell you that, oh, well, our sales aren't doing well, so maybe we need to, look into getting some sales training. When I was at the Dallas Business Journal, I actually attended the same sales training as you did, Professional Sales Skills by Achieve Global. I attended that sales training every time I got a new sales manager. So I saw the training 3 times. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, I got to go through this again just because I have a new sales manager? Are you kidding me? Why do I get punished for this? That was my thinking, right? However, during that time, what it actually did is by seeing it taught 3 times, I learned it really good. So now I can teach it. But back then, I didn't really know that was going to become a benefit in the end, right? But sometimes we get put in these situations where we think it's horrible, but it ends up helping us in the long run. So training isn't always the answer. And even as a sales manager, a sales director, and a sales coach, as many salespeople as I've worked with, there are 2 things that we look at. We look at, do they have the sales skills and do they have the product knowledge? Because if they're not performing, it's one of those 2 things. I'm here to tell you, there's another thing. There's another thing. It has to do with the individual drive. It also has to do with the environment, right? Because the environment can also breed to my success or to my failure. The people that I surround myself with can either help to lift me up or help to bring me down. So when we look at sales and how to improve it, it's not just about training, and it's also not just about the latest software. Once people say, oh, we need training, they get the sales training. Then they say, okay, well, our people just aren't being productive enough, so we need better systems and software. So then they put in the new systems. Then they got to teach people how to use those systems. So now people are using these systems, and they're using these new sales skills, and they've just been told to move from this comfort zone right here to doing things this way. Which, if any of y'all have ever crossed your arms and then tried to cross your arms the other way, it just doesn't feel good. I don't even know how to rest my hands right. And that's what we end up doing to our sales teams. And then our sales don't improve, and they wonder why. What's going on? There's more to it than that. So what we do is we take a more holistic look at the overall sales environment. And so what we do is we first say, okay, are we focused on the customer? Do we really care what the customer has to say? And also, just a little note about the booklets. The booklets are not page for page, slide for slide. What we did with the booklets is at the very back there's some notes where you guys can take notes, but the booklet has slides that are key slides. Okay, so if you're ever going back through this and reviewing it, you're going to have key models and key notes that you've made around those. So just don't be flipping through wondering what page we're on, okay? So when we look at how to create a high-performing sales team, we ask these questions. The first one is, do our behaviors support a customer-centered approach? When I was talking about the Dallas Business Journal earlier, and I said, our customers want to advertise with us, but they want it to say Dallas-Fort Worth. Can you do that? No. Think about it. They wanted to cover Dallas-Fort Worth. Tarrant County, Collin County, Dallas County, Denton County. But they still wanted it to be the Dallas Business Journal. Whose perspective were they taking there?
Theirs.
Theirs. It was an internally driven perspective. We're the Dallas Business Journal. We could never change our name. I'm here to tell you, when I left the Dallas Business Journal, when I left the Tarrant and Denton County Bureau office, that office shut down within 6 months. I was the last one holding the flag out there. I was bringing in the recommendations. I was telling them what needed to be done, and the answers were no, right? Because they weren't customer focused. So that's one of the key elements, is that we like to make sure that the companies we're working with are customer focused in the areas that they need to be customer focused. This is Julie's slide. The next thing we look at is organizational alignment. Is everybody in alignment, and do they agree? Rich can attest to this. I was brought into Kepner Trago to run a project for 3 to 5 years as their sales manager. And I can tell you that this one element right here in the organizational alignment was the detriment to that project not being able to produce the results that we looked for. We actually did produce the results we were looking for. In year 2, not in year 1, it was in year 2, we were actually able to improve and raise our revenue $1.2 million above the previous year. And After that year of success, we didn't have alignment. We had a new CEO that had some new ideas, put those new ideas into place, and the next year we did not have that type of revenue. Yet we were all supposed to be following the same strategy. And so when you don't have the C-suite aligned with all the functional pieces, marketing, sales, product development, when you don't have that alignment, people start to go off in different directions. And then when things don't work out, they start to point fingers and place blame on who's to blame. What's the department that isn't holding their weight and is the reason for why sales are not performing? When the reality is, the problem is with the top 6% of the organization. It's with the leaders. So another key area that a lot of people don't consider when these salespeople aren't doing their jobs, right? The other area we look at is, how are we going to make the number? What's the strategy? There are things that you have to align from a sales strategy standpoint that need to be in alignment and attunement with the organizational strategy, but the sales strategy is different than the organizational strategy. So you have to have that piece put in. And people need to know how they're going to make their number, right? How many people do I need to see in order to get enough people interested in my product? Got to know your numbers. Sales process. Do we know how, right? What is the process that we're going to use? We're going to talk a lot about process today, not as much as I typically do. We do have sales training classes that are your typical sales training. I'd call it Sales Process 101. We add in some communication styles and some relationship skills that kind of elevate our sales training programs and differentiate them a little bit. But once you get through that first course, then there's strategic selling. Then there's team selling. So there's lots of different types of selling out there. Some selling is more transactional, where some of it is more consultative. Some is B2B, some is B2C. Nowadays, there's a lot of B2B and B2C that's going on. So the way that you have your sales process set up, depending upon your business or your market, makes a big deal as well. So it's not just about the salesperson. There are some things that can be put in place to create an environment of success. But at the same time, there is also this bit of research. 60% of all sales made are made by the top 10% of salespeople. Why is that? What makes a great salesperson?
This is kind of like the 80-20 rule.
80-20 rule? In which way?
Well, 80% of your sales come from 20% of the clients, so it sounds kind of like that.
That is very true. And it is, the Pareto rule is very true. What about some characteristics? What do you think these top performers say and do differently?
Well, they have the gift of gab is one of the traits of a top salesperson.
You relate to people well. Persistent.
They ask great questions because they're good listeners.
Confidence.
Confidence.
Tenacity.
Goal-oriented.
Anything else?
Persistence. That kind of goes with tenacity.
Persistence?
Yeah, that's good.
Unbreakable mindset. They're going to achieve no matter what happens. They master the situation rather than letting the situation master them.
I think you have to be stubborn to be
Yes.
successful in sales.
Yes.
Or that other, there's a good word for the more positive.
Yeah, my dad calls that buggy. You know, growing up, I always had something that I wanted, and when my parents said no, I always had my rebuttal. I had my alternative. And when they said no to that, I had another alternative. when they said no to that, then it was usually something that I was gonna go do then to make it happen. So can I have permission to go do that? My dad used to be like, oh my gosh, you just bug so much.
That's creativity too. That's a
Creativity also, yes,
Yeah.
correct.
So you're